What's up, Rivalers, and welcome to the Ultimate Scarlet Witch Guide. Wanda is the easiest DPS, yet can still wipe entire teams in the blink of an eye. In this guide, I'll be covering her combos, playstyle, advanced tips, and more. So whether you are a complete beginner or high-ranking player, this video is for you. Wanda is a DPS control mage with quite a few tricks up her sleeve. Her left click is Chaos Control, which is the stream of constant damage, which has infinite ammo, has deceptively long range, has auto aim, is hit scan, meaning the damage comes out instantly and has no travel time, and restores your ammo count for your projectile spell. And if that sounds like a lot of value for literally just holding left click, yeah, it's kind of broken actually. It's also worth noting that Wanda's left click doesn't go through shields and Groot walls, and her ultimate can be entirely blocked by these things, so she has a very hard time doing her job against shield and wall characters. Her right click is her projectile spell. You'll get 4 shots, and sucking enemies with your left click restores your ammo faster. These shots are also area of effect, which means you can think of them as like little rocket launchers to throw into clumped up groups of enemies for lots of splash damage. Her E is a zone control spell where Wanda shoots an orb out, and once that orb hits an enemy or is reactivated early, creates a stun zone, and any enemies that are in this area are periodically stunned multiple times. The stuns don't last super long, but it's just long enough to be disruptive. This is a great little zoning tool that lets you control specific areas of the map, like choke points and hallways. It's also a decent self-peeling tool, so if an enemy tank or an assassin is on top of you, you can just shoot the orb at your feet, and you get a bunch of free stuns while you run away or return fire. Wanda's shift ability turns her invulnerable and allows her to freely fly, giving a bit of verticality, which is nice because she's otherwise a very immobile character. Her shift also has 2 charges, so you're going to want to always have at least 1 charge of this ability to get out of sticky situations. This ability is a great get out of jail free card, but it's important to remember that even though the enemies can't hurt you, using Mystic Projection also means your healers can't target you with heals. However, you can still pick up health packs in this form. You're invulnerable to taking new damage, and you look invisible on your screen, but the enemies actually see you as this flying little red ball, which can honestly be pretty hard to track. Also, you don't count as actually being on the objective when in this form, so be careful not to enter Mystic Projection when contesting the enemy taking the objective, or you're the last person holding the point in overtime. It's also worth noting that abilities that cause some form of damage over time can still affect you while in this form. For example, in this clip, Scarlet Witch gets hit by Venom's tether ability before she uses Mystic Projection. As you can see, the tether is still connected, and she ends up getting KO'd because of the tether damage. There's lots of clever ways to use Mystic Projection's flight ability, and remember that holding the jump button also lets Wanda float gently down to the ground. Her ultimate ability is the most powerful ult in the game. After a wind-up period where Wanda screams at the top of her lungs, she then decimates the entire area around her in this big explosion, dealing an instant 700 damage. You will be extremely vulnerable during its lengthy wind-up, and once you start, you can't stop. So make sure you're going to be able to survive its lengthy cast time. The enemy team also gets to see your location with a visual indicator when you begin casting. So while it can be a team wiping ultimate, it can also quickly get you targeted and bursted down. Wanda is a very straightforward DPS, and as a control mage, mastering her relies more on game knowledge and consistency rather than flashy mechanics or aiming. And speaking of consistency, outside of her ultimate, Wanda can't really match the high burst of other DPS, but she more than makes up for that with her consistent damage output. She doesn't need to reload, so you should practically always be tagging someone with your left click drain and using your right click charges very liberally. If you have more than 2 right click charges, you are not using them fast enough. Use your right clicks to contribute to faraway team fights, use them to focus down specific targets, use them to punish clumped up enemies, just use them. Because the beautiful thing about Wanda is your medium range left click recharges them really fast, so Wanda's playstyle is basically cycling between left and right click for a constant uptime of damage. There really shouldn't be any downtime compared to other DPS like Spider-Man, who can go from doing a lot of burst in 2 seconds to not doing much of anything for the next 10 seconds. As Scarlet Witch, you don't want to just sit behind your tanks. You'll want to constantly be pressuring the enemies and abusing that high ground advantage. Good Wanda players are in the air a lot and are constantly using this airtime to find good angles to DPS, break the line of enemy sight, making it harder for them to hit you, finding flank angles, and just generally making themselves more slippery. Now, while Wanda can play offensively in flank, she really shines when positioning in the middle of her team where she can counter flank divers like Black Panther and Spider-Man. Your left click and E are perfect tools to shut them down when they try to dive you or your healers. You have literal auto aim on, so no matter how many dashes they have, your left click shuts them down fast. The beautiful thing about playing Wanda is that you essentially opt in and out of the fights whenever you want, which means you can choose when when and where to fight the enemy. Did the enemy burst you a little too hard and you're afraid of getting KO'd? Use Mystic Projection and fly away to safety. Does the enemy team have high ground and they're focusing your team below? Use Mystic Projection in and get some free damage out before they even realize you're on their level. Mystic Projection also lets you dodge telegraphed attacks. Things like Venom swinging into the air and diving on you, and Magneto's ults are super easy to dodge with this ability. In fact, you can go invulnerable and dodge most ultis in the game, since they're usually accompanied by a cast time and a voice line. It's super satisfying to do this. This makes Wanda a very slippery target to focus because at any point you can just shift out of a fight when you're at a disadvantage, putting the enemy team into a waiting room for you to reappear, and snap in on a fight whenever you're at an advantage, such as when you see the enemy has used key spells, lost focus on you, or when you see them reloading. You can use Mystic Projection to offensively push and stat check flyers, and also it gets you in the air before using your ultimate. For instance, you can Mystic Projection up to the ceiling lip, charge your ultimate from an angle the enemy team can't quite hit you, then drop down just before the ultimate goes off. Wanda's ult lets you freely fly around just like your shift ability, so you should use it to straddle behind cover and only come out once you're ready at the end of its cast time. You could use these orbs that appear around Wanda as a timer. When the third orb appears, that is your signal to start moving out of cover and into the enemy team. You're going to have a hard time landing your ultimate without lots of setup and smart usage of cover. And just know that not every Wanda ultimate has to be this big 6-man KO. You can use it to take out 1 or 2 key targets, leaving the rest of the enemy team at a numbers disadvantage for the rest of the fight. You can also use it as a massive zoning tool to clear enemies out of an objective area. Sometimes clearing a key strategic position is just as important as getting the actual KOs. And remember our 3 orb rule from earlier to know when to start moving. Just be aware that using both charges of Mystic Projection makes you one of the most vulnerable characters in the game. Be smart about it and try to always have 1 charge left for when things get sticky. Now let's talk about some of the weaker or more difficult areas of playing Scarlet Witch. Wanda really struggles against shield characters as they not only block her left and right clicks, it can block her ultimate entirely. Her lack of burst also means she can struggle to take out tanks who are receiving heals faster than her own damage can output. So be sure to focus on squishier targets and leave the tank busting to your other team members. You should really only be focusing tanks if they're super low HP or you're just using them as a meat shield to charge up your ultimate charge. And speaking of your ultimate, Wanda is very vulnerable during her ult's lengthy cast time. Not only can she be KO'd, it is super easy to disrupt Wanda's ultimate before it goes off with any form of CC. So be sure to look for any enemies that use key spells such as Mantis's Sleep, Hulk Stun, and other CC abilities before you use your ultimate. If these spells are on cooldown, you're going to have a much easier time surviving until the end of the cast. Wanda has enormous synergy with Magneto, which makes sense because she is his daughter after all. Magneto can use his bubble shield on you to give you a much easier time landing ultimates without getting popped first. And having a Wanda on the team enables Magneto's Metal Sword team-up ability, which is easily the most broken team-up in the game. Wanda is an extremely noob-friendly character that is easy to pick up and play, but has lots of pockets of skill expression for those willing to put in the time and truly learn the character. Be sure to always save 1 charge of Mystic Projection, use your verticality to control areas, and use your ult intelligently. If you follow these tips, you will be turning entire teams into dust in no time. Let me know which character you'd like to see a guide on next, and until next time, Rivalers.